Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about ego and game directors and how those two things often seem conflated in people's minds. And I want to talk about, I've talked about how to be a good game director, but I'm going to talk specifically about what it is about having a strong ego but not being egotistical means for being a good game director. So the game director I've talked about is the person who holds the vision for the game being made. So questions that arise, does this feature belong? Is this character a good character? Is this storyline good? Ultimately, those go up to the game director. Now, usually they have a lot of leads, a lead narrative, a lead artist, a lead system mechanics person. And those people are deciding a lot of this, but they're doing it based on the director's philosophy. And being a good game director means having a very clear philosophy of game design and communicating it to the team. If you remember, I talked about writing design docs and that they should have goals. Design docs are more than just, here, do it this way. At the top of every design doc, I recommended having a goal saying, this is why I want this feature. It supports this goal. Maybe it's a goal of making melee and ranged combat feel different. Maybe it's a goal of making sure that the different paths you make in the game, combat, stealth, dialogue, are supported. But then when you go and read further on the page, and maybe it's a page about weapons, or maybe it's a page about skills, you will see it reference that goal and go, this is to support this goal. Now, a good game director should be willing to discuss those goals with people on the team and be willing to change them if they cause a problem in the game. For example, someone may read a weapon design and go to the game director and say, this weapon doesn't support keeping melee and range distinct. Or, hey, I'm worried about us keeping melee and range distinct because it's causing this kind of weapon not to be put in the game. Notice those are two different things. One is talking about this weapon doesn't meet the goal, and the other is saying, I think this goal is causing a problem. But both of them are saying, here's a problem that's being caused. Let's discuss it in terms of either the goals being wrong or the goals leading to, or something not supporting those goals. Now, when I talk about wanting to discuss these things, there's a limit that every game director has to how often and how much they want these goals constantly confronted. First of all, the discussion should be that it's causing some sort of problem. But if you're not doing your work, if your work is getting behind and your reason is, well, I've been spending a lot of time arguing about these goals, then that's a problem. You should be able to get your work done and still be able to say, hey, I see a problem with this. You can shoot off an email. You can send off a Slack message. You don't have to spend 2 hours every day arguing with your game director. If that happens, something's wrong, either with you or the game director. Also, you have to understand that some disagreements are subjective. If the problems that are arising, if either the director doesn't see it as a problem, or he sees it as a problem that's not very high priority, or it's a problem he's willing to accept because the other things that the feature introduces support much better, bigger, important goals, they can tell you all this. And yes, this all sounds subjective, but guess what? Once something becomes subjective, the director always wins. That's just how it is. That's why they're the game director. The game director wins subjective arguments. Now, if you came there and you said, look, I saw this problem, you state you're trying to do this, but this particular feature works exactly against it, that's an issue. But they can still say, I see that, I'm willing to accept a little bit of exceptions in my game. Now, if you find 4 more of these, okay, bring them up. At some point, the game director should recognize these are no longer subjective, these are very objective arguments, and do something. By the way, when either with myself or with other game directors, I'm way more impressed with developed game philosophies than adopted game philosophies. And what I mean by that is a developed one is one that you worked out yourself over time, but and you looked at other games, you talked to people, you developed this philosophy. This is how I like games to be. An adopted one is you worked under someone and he said, always do it this way. And you didn't really even know why, but you're like, okay, things will always be done this way. I've worked with a lot of people who will come in, especially if they're new to the company I'm working at, and say, well, this is the way things are done. And I'm like, why? And they don't know. Well, this is how I was told to do it. I'm like, yeah, but we're trying to do this other thing. We do it this way to support this design goal. Sometimes they don't even know why they're like, oh, this other way doesn't support that. And I'm like, yes, that's why we're doing it this way. That's why it's good to have goals. But you often find that people have beliefs that were simply handed to them. And they have no justifications for it other than, this is the way we've always done it. This happens a lot outside games. I don't watch football, but my family's a big football watching family. They always rooted for the hometown team. We grew up in Washington, D.C., so they always rooted for that team. However, my brother-in-law liked the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't grow up in Minnesota. He grew up in D.C. as well. So that interested me. I talked to him about that several times. It's like, what do you like about Minnesota? And he had reasons. In other words, he decided what team to like. He just didn't accept, well, this is where I was born, so this is the one I'm rooting for. You can do either one. One is interesting, one is not. One is thoughtful, one is not. Similarly, when I was in grad school, I had a friend who changed religions as an adult. And not like to or from a cult, which is its own thing. And the difference between a cult and a religion is a whole other video that's not for this channel. But I'm very secular, and as an adult, he changed from one major world religion to a different one. That was interesting to me, especially because I had taken a comparative religion class just a couple years before. We had a lot of talks about that. And at first he was worried about talking about it because he thought I was trying to question his decision. I just wanted to know what causes that, because very few people do that. Most people are the religion of their parents. They don't think about it. They don't question it. And if they're questioned, they get very upset because they can't defend it. It's basically, I was raised this way. This is the way I am. So, yeah, people don't like having any belief system questioned, which is, by the way, a good way of telling if someone developed a belief system or adopted it. If you question it, the person who developed one can answer your questions. The person who adopted one will usually just get upset and be mad at you. Why are you questioning me? So that's a very good indication if you want to work for a game director. Ask questions about why certain things are done, how they are in the game. If they're willing to tell you why, great. If they just go, that's the way we do it, be concerned. Anyway, I had great discussions with this guy, and he opened my mind about, hey, for some people, religion really works well for them. It met, he had needs that religion met, that his other religion didn't, and non-religious activities didn't. And that was great. Well, we've really gone off on a tangent. What does all of this have to do with ego? Well, for many people, they see game directors as simply very egotistical, loud designers. They seem to always be saying, just do this my way. And they are, because they're the game director. They have the vision. They want something done a certain way, but they should be able to tell you why. They should be able to explain it, and they should be consistent. That's the biggest thing I think people should point out when they're looking at design docs for a game, going, this is not consistent with your stated philosophy and goals on these pages. If the goals aren't there, ask for them to be put there. If they're good at what they do, they should be able to come up with those goals very easily. And keep in mind, you can always disagree, and at some point you can become a game director yourself. In fact, if you find yourself frequently disagreeing with the game directors at your studio, and you have a nice developed philosophy yourself, try to become a game director. Now, don't show up at the company having never made a game before and say, I want to be a game director. Doesn't work that way. I can't tell you how many people at Interplay told me how great it was that, because I was the project lead, which is equivalent to the game director, on Fallout, and like, oh, that's cool that you got to do that so quickly. And I was like, I worked at another company before this. I've been in the industry for 13 years before I even got Fallout. And it was a bit of a luck, it was like, Tom Decker, my producer, had to go switch. He had too many projects, and so I needed to just take it over. It wasn't that somebody gave it to me. It just sort of like fell in my lap. But even then, I'd been working in the industry for 13 years before that opportunity arose. I'm not saying it'll take that long for you, but if you just show up at a game company with very little experience and go, I'm a game director, you're not going to be a game director. Also, try to develop your philosophy. It's what I've been saying this whole video. Don't just decide on one. Develop it. How do you develop it? Talk to other game developers. See what they like. See what they don't like. Ask them why. If they can't explain why, go to another developer. Play a lot of games. See how you feel about them. Maybe a game will change your mind about a philosophy. Maybe a game will show you a way of doing something that you never thought of that doesn't fit with your philosophy, so you can expand your philosophy or add an extra part to your philosophy. Conferences are great, like the GDC. Other conferences are good. You can watch them online. Plus, there's a ton of videos you can watch online. And try to figure out what those people's philosophies are behind what they're telling you to make. They're usually stated. And then, in all of this stuff, ask questions. Ask questions to your other developers. Find people online. People ask questions on my channel all the time, and I try to explain what my philosophy is. If you've watched, there's over 250 videos now. My philosophy should be pretty obvious. I love player agency. I love nonlinear storylines. I love having the reactivity to what the player does. That's my philosophy. So ask questions. Ask questions online. Ask questions to other developers. Play games. Go to those forums and ask questions. Why do you suppose they did this? Why does this work in this game but not in this game? Hey, I always thought this was a way to do something, but they're doing this other thing. Why does it work here? Or does it not work here? Am I missing something? These are great things to ask. And then when you finally get an opportunity to become a game director, you should be able to make a strong case for why it should be you, and you should be able to express your design philosophy very clearly. And it doesn't need to be egotistical. It just needs to be strongly supported. Anyway, that's my thoughts on ego and game directors.